you're feeling confused about your retirement planning as a single person, then you're not alone. Married people and single people certainly have different considerations when it comes to retirement planning. So in today's video, I'm going to show you exactly what those differences are. I'm going to dissect a real client case study, revealing some of the important tips you need to take with you as you're planning for retirement as a single individual. We'll cover everything from optimizing Social Security based on a few different nuances, adjusting your savings rate, and even how do you plan differently if children aren't in the picture. So let's jump into Jeremy's financial plan to reveal some of these important differences. So here's Jeremy here, and of course the name has been changed, assets have been simplified, but this is the crux of the plan, or this is the foundation of the financial plan that we went through. And as you can see, Jeremy, he's 59 years old, never married, no children, and wants to make sure that he's optimizing his financial plan, and specifically his retirement plan, for a couple reasons I'll get to in just a second. But as we get to his net worth statement, or his overall financial condition today, you can see that he owns his condo in Scottsdale, he has a little bit of a mortgage remaining on it, and then he's got some savings and checking. He has $220,000 in his 401k, $753,000 in a rollover IRA, $77,000 in his Roth IRA, and then just under $500,000 in his taxable account. So an important thing to know about Jeremy is this, is he came to us with some very real concerns. See, Jeremy's father had passed away at 62, and his father had some big plans for his retirement. He was really excited for that next chapter of life and had a whole bunch of things he wanted to do, but his time was cut short. And so Jeremy saw that and it left an impression upon him. Now at the same time, after Jeremy's father passed away prematurely, his mother lived until the age of 93. And because of the premature passing of his father, his mother struggled financially towards the end of her life to the point that Jeremy had to chip in and financially support his mom. So he was wrestling with the tension of these two competing factors. On the one hand, his dad died early and didn't get to enjoy everything he worked for. On the other hand, his mother lived very long and she wasn't financially sufficient to be able to support herself. So as Jeremy came to us, those were the two competing fears or concerns, both very valid fears and concerns, and we needed to construct a plan to address both of them. Let's walk through how we did that. And to do so, let's start by looking at Jeremy's goals. So Jeremy's first goal was to work until the age of 70. So he's 59 years old today. He wanted to work 11 more years. And as I mentioned, there's these simultaneous fears. One is missing out on life, dying early like his father had and missing out on some of the experiences that he's really looking forward to. On the other hand, not being sufficiently financially prepared to retire, and then because he doesn't have children, he wouldn't really have anybody to depend upon at that time. It wouldn't be like his mother who had Jeremy, he wouldn't have anyone that he could depend upon to help him financially. So because of that, that fear of outliving his money, that fear of not being okay, weighed even heavier on Jeremy than did missing out on life by working too long. So when he came to us, he said, you know what, I'm thinking of working until 70. I want to make really sure that I don't outlive my money. So that's what we started with. We went through Jeremy's expenses and his budget, not just his budget today, but what he thought his budget at retirement would look like based upon some of the things that he wanted to do. It would cost about $5,200 per month for Jeremy to maintain his lifestyle, so that's what we're planning for here. Next, we looked at retirement health costs. So we're assuming about $6,100 per month for Jeremy's healthcare costs based upon an exercise we went through. And we're also planning on long-term care. So Jeremy saw his mother go through some long-term care events and not be financially okay, not have the ability to support that. So it's really important to him that we had a plan in place ahead of time to make sure that we addressed that contingency. We did so by planning for long-term care costs. We're assuming the last 2 years of his life that he would pay an additional $54,000 per year, which is the national average for what assisted living costs. Now, this national average, this $54,000, we were conservative and added it on top of these other expenses. So it wasn't $54,000 total, it's $54,000 plus annual health care, plus retirement expenses and everything else, just to make sure we are properly preparing for whatever expenses might come up. Now, the next goal that we're planning for was travel. Jeremy lived in Scottsdale, as we said. He loved going to Sedona. He loved going to Utah. He loved hiking and being outdoors. When time allowed, which unfortunately wasn't too frequently these days, he loved international trips, but work was really busy and it was difficult for him to find the time to take the international trips. And even when he did, he felt like he was always consumed with work. He was always checking email and not really fully able to escape. So when he did retire, we wanted to budget a higher amount to say, Jeremy, let's make sure you can take some of these trips that you're not really able to take today. And we did so at $40,000 per year. Now we had the conversation and said, Jeremy, at what age do you think you're not going to want to take those international trips anymore? Lots of time zone changes, lots of long flights, lots of what can be wear and tear on the body. And he said, you know what, realistically, probably not that long after 72 or so, just based upon his health and what he was expecting into the future. So we said, let's plan on 40,000 per year, but it would really only be a couple years. So 70 and 71 of 40,000. And then he wanted to continue traveling from 72 until 80, based upon what we're looking at here, but maybe to a lesser extent. So we're planning on $20,000 per year after that. So these are the goals that Jeremy shared with us, and keep this in mind of those two competing fears: living too long, dying too early, both perfectly natural, because I want to show you how do we weave in between both of those to create a plan that fully addresses both to minimize the risk of both. But the next thing that we looked at for Jeremy is his income. So he has strong income today. His salary and bonus is about $145,000. And his Social Security, he was planning to collect at 70. So he's working, of course, until 70. Now, this is an important consideration if you're single. Now, if you're married, you're looking at joint lives, and you're looking at two different Social Security benefits. And maybe you maximize one and take another early, depending on your strategy. For Jeremy, in his specific situation, he doesn't have kids that he can depend upon. He doesn't have a spouse whose Social Security benefit he could depend upon if that spouse delayed. He really wanted to make sure that he minimized longevity risk. He minimized the risk of ending up like his mother, where he lived too long and didn't have funds to be able to support that. Because of that, we both agreed that it made most sense for Jeremy to collect at age 70, not only because he was working until 70, but even if he did stop working sooner. That would provide a nice source of income, so that even if Jeremy did live until 90, 95, or 100, he's got a solid income floor that he can count on. So Jeremy's benefit, his Social Security benefit at full retirement age, it's considered his primary insurance amount, would be $3,450. But because he's waiting until 70, this number here, this $3,450, will increase by 8% per year until he turns 70. So he'll end up getting a higher benefit, which helped to alleviate the fear of ending up in a financially difficult position like his mother previously had. Now, between now and 70, Jeremy was saving to a number of different accounts. He's saving 5% to his 401k. He's saving $8,000 to his Roth IRA. He's also saving his bonus, which after tax tends to be about $10,000 per year. He's saving that to an after-tax account. When Jeremy came to us, these are the investments, or these are the savings rates that he was currently putting away. Now, if you recall from looking at Jeremy's assets, he already had a pretty decent sized pre-tax balance, which is why he reduced his 401k down to 5%. He did that 5% to get the full advantage of the match and just to put money into his 401k. And he's really trying to prioritize the Roth IRA contributions here. Now, we know that we looked at his investments before, and what we're assuming is a growth rate of 7.5% per year on his investments, based on the way he's invested, between 59 and 70, and then a 6.2% rate of return on his investments from age 70 and beyond once he's retired and now living on those dollars. So this kind of paints the picture of where Jeremy was. We know his goals and his concerns and his fears. We understand his assets, his income sources, his savings. Now what we want to start to do is understand what will his retirement cash flows look like, because that helps us to answer the first question in retirement planning, which is he going to be okay? Is he on track to be able to do this? So here's that page that helps us to answer that question. This is Jeremy's retirement cash flows, and I'm going to skip forward to his retirement years of understanding when Jeremy retires, what will his income sources be, so we can compare that to his expenses, and then we can understand how his portfolio fits in the whole picture. So at age 70, what will his income sources be? Well, his salary went away, because you can see up until age 70, we're planning on a salary. That goes away, but it gets replaced, at least to an extent, by Social Security. Here's what Jeremy's Social Security benefit would be after he's maximized it at age 70, which works for a variety of different reasons, specifically to address Jeremy's fear of living too long and making sure that we're protecting against longevity risk. Next, we're comparing that to his expenses. So if we look at his expenses, Jeremy wanted to live on $5,200 per month in today's dollars. That comes out to $62,400 per year on an annual basis, but that's in today's dollars. We're not planning on Jeremy retiring today and supporting that lifestyle. We're planning on him retiring in 11 years. Now, in 11 years, a gallon of milk is more expensive. A dozen eggs is more expensive. A gallon of gas is more expensive. You get the picture. So we need to assume that everything that Jeremy purchases today is increasing with inflation over that next 11 years. Well, that's what this number represents here. This represents that $5,200 per month in today's dollars, but adjusted for inflation on an annual basis over time. So at age 70, we need $86,000 coming in per year to cover what today could be covered by about $62,400. Now, on top of that, we're planning for extra healthcare costs for Jeremy. Or not extra healthcare costs, but just healthcare costs. So this is the amount needed here, these total expenses. This helps us to understand, Jeremy, how much do you need coming in so you can pay your healthcare and then have the equivalent of $5,200 per month in today's dollars coming in. Now, we didn't stop there, because if you recall, Jeremy has some grand travel goals. Now, he doesn't know what his health is going to be like. He doesn't know how many years he's going to want to take some of those big trips that he has on his bucket list. But what we're planning for with vacation is a larger amount of travel, more expensive travel for the first couple years. Jeremy, you're retired. You have time. You have the means. Go take some of those awesome trips. But he didn't think you'd be taking those for an incredibly long period of time after the age of 70. So a couple years of that, and then backing that off and cutting that number in about half and doing that until the age of 80. So those were the extra goals that we were planning for. Then on top of all that, Jeremy's going to have taxes. So really, we don't want to send Jeremy a paycheck and say, okay, Jeremy, here's your money. Now within this, you have to go pay taxes and then spend what's left. It's, Jeremy, here's your paycheck after taxes have already been paid. Use this to fund your travel, to fund your healthcare, to fund the $5,200 per month in today's dollars so you can do everything that's really important to you. So as we add all those expenses up, we can start to do so. Of what are his core expenses, plus the travel goals, plus taxes, here's the total amount Jeremy wants to be able to create, or here's the amount he needs to be able to create so he can pay taxes, take the trips he wants to take, pay for healthcare, and then still have $5,200 per month in today's dollars left over. Here's the issue. There's a shortfall between how much he wants to spend and how much he has coming in income. The shortfall is exactly $112,703. Shouldn't say that's bad news. That's normal news. There's always going to be a shortfall. There's almost always going to be a shortfall. That's where Jeremy's portfolio comes into play. If Jeremy's portfolio needs to be able to create $112,000 that first year of retirement, and then you see how that number starts to change over time. You see how this number actually turns into a positive number. It's not so much a positive number as much as we start factoring in what Jeremy's projected required distributions will be at age 75 from his IRA. And so when we include his required distribution as an income source, well, it's not truly an income source as much as a forced distribution. He's actually projected to have a little bit of a surplus above and beyond what he otherwise would have spent in those years. But going back to this number here, we wanted to help Jeremy understand, are you going to be in a position to be able to generate that? Not just because that's the crux of core retirement planning, but to address his very natural fears of, hey, I don't want to be on a path where I might retire and maybe make it, but also maybe end up like my mother, where I run out of money, and unlike my mother, I don't have kids who can help to take care of me. So the next thing that we needed to do was we needed to project out, Jeremy, how much might you have in your portfolio by the time you turn 70? How much might you have to supplement Social Security to put a plan in place to allow you to do everything you want to do, but also ensure you're going to be okay for the rest of your life? So that's what we're looking at here. Here's the beginning balance, or here's the balance in Jeremy's portfolio. Here's how much he's planning to save to his 401k or his Roth IRA. Here's the employer matching contributions. Here's the extra amount that Jeremy's investing from his bonus. And then here's the projected portfolio return. We're assuming about a 7.5% rate of return between now and Jeremy's age 70 based upon the asset mix that Jeremy has. Jeremy will not get exactly 7.5% per year. That's a no-brainer. That's a given. However, what we do know is he's going to get somewhere north of that or somewhere south of that in any given year. What's important isn't that he's getting it every single year, as much as is he averaging somewhere around that. We're very clear with him. Hey, you may or you may not. You may do much better, you may do much worse. And that's why this planning process is iterative. And we want to come back to this and revisit this. But assuming this as a starting point, what would that do to your portfolio over time? Well, here's your balance today, $1.58 million. After saving and matching and portfolio growth, his portfolio is projected to grow to about $4.1 million by the time that he is 70. So it's gone up significantly from where it is today. It's almost increased threefold by that time. So as we're looking at this, we're saying, Jeremy, here's the amount you're projected to have. And of course, this projection is subject to change and will change. But based on these assumptions, here's what you're projected to have to create the income you need to supplement Social Security. The question is that enough of a portfolio balance to be able to do this? Is that enough of a portfolio balance so that when we look at your withdrawal rate, as we look at right here, are you taking too much out of your portfolio each year such that you may run the risk of drawing down your portfolio too quickly? Here's the page that helped us to answer that for him. When we divide Jeremy's projected withdrawal from his portfolio each year by his projected portfolio balance, we get a withdrawal rate. And you can see the first couple of years that withdrawal rate's about 2.5%. then that withdrawal rate drops. And that makes sense because if you remember, Jeremy's spending a lot more on travel those first couple years. That withdrawal rate drops to under 2% for the next 3 years. Then it increases to 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, but it's not because Jeremy's spending all of a sudden increases, it's because he's being forced to take out more from his portfolio. If we quickly reminded Jeremy, just because you're required to take a distribution from your IRA, doesn't mean you can't turn around and reinvest it in a brokerage account. This is just how much you're going to be required to take from your portfolio, but nothing's stopping you from turning around and reinvesting that. Now, I don't say that because I encourage everyone to reinvest the required distribution. I say that because I was speaking to Jeremy's fear of, look, he doesn't want to be in a position where he's taking too much out of his portfolio, even if it's a forced distribution. So as we look at this, we provided some context of a normal withdrawal rate. Look at the 4% rule, for example. You can take 4% per year out of your portfolio based on research done by Bill Bengen. In that portfolio, even if you retire into a horrible market with high inflation, maybe the worst market you could have retired into over the last 70, 80, 90 years, if you take 4% out or less, that portfolio is going to last for 30 plus years. Now that research, of course, is based upon previous market returns and market environments. There's no guarantee that the future will be the same. In fact, the future certainly won't be the same. But what it does include is it does include some pretty challenging market environments that we've been in the past. It includes some environments with really high inflation, really low returns, years in a row of bad returns. So when we look at 4% as a starting point, see, Jeremy, if you're taking out 4% or less, you've got a pretty good shot to this money lasting for at least 30 years. If you retire at 70, 30 years takes you to 100. And by the way, Jeremy, this money that we're looking at, this doesn't even include the value of your condo, which would be fully paid off by the time that we get to this point. So when you factor in, Jeremy, that you've got a maxed out Social Security benefit, you've got a withdrawal rate that's underneath what we would consider sustainable. When you factor in the fact that you have equity in a condo that we're not even including in this projection, we feel really good that you're minimizing the risk that what happened to your mom is also going to happen to you. In fact, if we take it a step further, here's what things might look like, Jeremy. Here's your portfolio today. Here's what you're projected to grow by based upon the growth rates that we're assuming and the assumptions we're assuming. And even when you retire, your portfolio is projected to keep growing. This is just your portfolio. Your condo's on top of that. But Jeremy, your concern, your valid concern about, hey, I don't want to retire too early, I don't see that being too much of a risk. I think that you're in a good spot. In fact, if we look at your probability of success, meaning even if you retire in 2008 happens and inflation skyrockets and all these terrible things happen, your probability of success is still 99%. That's incredibly high, incredibly reassuring that you're in a good spot to make this happen. So as we looked at this together, it's very clear to me, and it became very clear to Jeremy, that he was very much protected against risk number one, which is living too long and running out of money. He had a 99% probability of success. Even if he did run out of money, he had a very high Social Security benefit that he had maximized. We had already included 2 years of long-term care expenses in his base plan. Even if all else failed, he still has equity in a condo that's worth quite a bit of money by the time that Jeremy's in his 90s or beyond. So I felt very strongly that Jeremy was in a good position there. So my bigger concern with Jeremy wasn't that he wasn't going to be okay for the rest of his life. It was that he was going to work too long, do too much, and in doing so risk missing out on much of what life had to offer. Let me show you how I illustrated that to Jeremy. So let's go back to Jeremy's projection here. This shows what if he lives till 95 and all these assumptions that we just highlighted come true. Well, this is showing Jeremy living until 95. What if Jeremy doesn't live until 95? In fact, what if maybe he doesn't pass away as soon as his father did, but not too long thereafter? What if he works until 70 and then passes away at age 70? Well, what you can see here, this was what his previous projection looked like. This green, obviously, is what his new projection looks like. Jeremy, you work all these years and then you die and you're not able to take any of these trips. You're not able to do any of these things. Yes, you protected yourself against the risk that your mom went through, but you very much exposed yourself to the risk that your father experienced. And as we look at this lighter purple here that you can see, this isn't just lost money, this is lost experiences. Jeremy, this is lost living. This is things that you were supposed to do, but you weren't able to do because you worked too long. And maybe in doing so, you neglected your health or just something bad happened. And you never got the chance to fully experience this. So that was my bigger concern for Jeremy. And we started to work through a plan to say, how can we protect against that? So let's start to reset this. And I started talking to Jeremy and I said, Jeremy, you have some amazing travel goals that you want to do. Every time I talked to Jeremy, he had a new story of a new adventure, of a hike he took, or a thing that he did in Utah or Arizona, and he always wanted to do more. He always wanted to take longer trips, but as I mentioned, it was difficult because work was so busy, and it was truly difficult to really escape. So I said, Jeremy, more than anything, I want to make sure you can take some of those trips. I want to make sure those bucket list items that you've told me about, I want to make sure those can happen. What would this look like? I'm just hypothetically here, Jeremy. What if you did stop working at 65? So it's still 6 more years of work, but what if you did that instead of age 70? So as we look at this, even just hypothetically, what does that mean, Jeremy? Well, it means 5 more years or 5 fewer years of income. So your salary goes away. It's 5 fewer years of savings and investments. It's 5 fewer years of compounding those investments. It's 5 more years of extra travel. So yes, that's an extra expense. That's 5 more years of $40,000 per year of travel as opposed to $20,000 per year of travel. But that's what this money's for. That's really what excites you. That's really what lights you up. So let's not sacrifice that just to potentially end up with millions of dollars at age 95 and be overly protected. Let's see, what can we do to put you in a position to begin enjoying that? So as we looked at this, we said, yeah, Jeremy, this does mean that there's fewer dollars left at the end of the day. But look at this. You still are projected to have almost $6 million in your portfolio by the age of 95. Now, by the time that you're 95, $6 million doesn't represent what it does today at age 59, but it's still a significant value. And it's not as if you have children or heirs that you are really desperately wanting to leave money to. Really what you want to do is be okay for the rest of your life, but if we could somehow guarantee that you spend down all of your money on every last adventure you could and not have anything left over at the end, hey, that's the best of both worlds. Now, is that realistic in practice where you actually bounce your last check? Probably not, because there's so many unknowns and so many things that we just can't control. But how can we make sure that we're not over saving and over deferring and costing experiences today? So yes, you're still projected to be okay. And what does that do to your probability of success? You're at 83%. Now that might seem scary, but what that really means, Jeremy, is 17% of the time, 17 out of 100 cases, I'm gonna have to come to you and say, hey, can we defer one of those trips today? Can we cut back on some of these expenses today? Can we make some adjustment to your plan so that you don't get to a position where you end up in the circumstances that your mother did? But here's the thing, this 83% probability of success, this doesn't just turn to 0 overnight. It goes from 83 to 80 to 75 to 70. So Jeremy, as we're going through this together, we're gonna be monitoring this in real time. In the same way, a plane that's flying high doesn't just hit 0 altitude all of a sudden. There's a trajectory. You start to read the gauges and read the monitors and saying, okay, we're off course. We need to course correct. Well, the same thing is true for your planning. So we don't need this to be 100. In fact, we really don't want this to be 100. That means you're more than likely leaving a lot on the table. This is a perfectly fine scenario because you've maxed Social Security. We're already counting on long-term care costs in your plan. You have equity in a condo that we haven't even touched yet. So I feel very comfortable with this. What does this mean for you, Jeremy? 5 fewer years of work, 5 more years of those epic travels that you talked about. And on top of this, Jeremy, let me show you one more thing that we're looking at. You're currently saving $10,000 per year right now from your bonus. What if you didn't do that? What if I just turned this to 0? What would that look like? Well, your probability of success goes from 83 to 81. Not a significant difference. Yeah, it's a change, but it's not a material change. Why does that matter? It's not to say I don't think it's good to save. I do think it's good to save. But you love travel. You want to avoid the risk of having something happen to you like it happened to your dad, where his future was pulled away from him prematurely. The reality is we have no idea how long we have. And if you forego some of these trips and you forego some of these experiences too long, you may never get to take them. So what if instead of deferring all of this until retirement, what if you took that $10,000 and started doing stuff today? I know it's challenging. I know there's work stuff. I know we talked about that, but are there things that you could do today with that $10,000 to enjoy more, to travel more, to adventure more? And Jeremy thought about it and said, yeah, absolutely. I don't have to take those trips to Europe and those 3-week trips across the sea where I want to go for my bucket list trips. I could absolutely do some really cool things with that today. So what we started to do is develop a plan to say, can you be okay in the future? Can you protect against longevity and the risk of not having anyone care for you in the future if you run out of money? Yes. Can we do that simultaneously to you doing more today, having a plan to stop working sooner rather than later? And the answer to that was also yes. So as we walked away from that meeting, Jeremy didn't walk away saying, okay, cool, now I know exactly what my life is going to hold and what my future is going to look like. No. Instead, good financial planning, some of this process is designed to answer the question, what's possible? What could life look like? What am I on track for? How does this change based upon different assumptions changing? And now that Jeremy started to see what was possible, he started to break free from that fear, that consuming fear of, am I going to be okay for the rest of my life? And could start thinking about, what do I want to do to truly live? He saw that he didn't need to work until 70 and defer until 70, put off everything until 70. Instead, he saw that he could start doing things today to live a more meaningful life today, to get more out of life with his money today, as opposed to all this being a future thing. So what this did is it led to the beginning of a mindset shift for Jeremy that said, how do I live a more balanced life? And really, that's how good financial planning should be done. Yes, we need to plan and prepare for the future and plan for contingencies. But we also need to take a look at today and understand that today is precious and today matters. And what can we do to both prepare for the future as well as plan for today? I talked more about this in this video that you'll see a link to right here. And really, it's the new retirement strategy. It's no longer about pre-retirement and post-retirement. It's about balanced living. It's about better living, of how can we align our time, our money, our resources, our energy in a way that best supports our vision for a better future, as well as our vision for a better today. I hope you'll check it out. Once again, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial. And if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients at Root Financial get the most out of life with their money, be sure to visit us at www.rootfinancialpartners.com.